while they're coming down, take a look at the wall across there. And if you haven't been able to look at any of these things, I invite you after this service, or after the meal, or during the meal, or sometime come back in here and just look a little more closely at the pictures on this wall. They all have something to do with how we here at St. Luke's have always told our story about how we've tried as a parish and continue to try as a parish to answer the call we heard in the Gospel of Mark rather than Luke today. The Gospel where Jesus is reminding the person who is questioning him that the core of who we are is what the core of teaching was in Judaism, Jesus' religion. He is calling them to remember that when they get distracted. And in the years after Jesus died and rose again, as groups began to form and eventually became what we now call Christians, Jesus would never have heard of that term. They inherited from Jesus his religion, the Jewish religion. And at the core, the heart of Judaism, no matter what else happens within it, and at the core and heart of Christianity, no matter what else happens in it, plenty of things bad throughout history have happened in both. The core is always to love God, and to love God, the only way we can really love God is to love our neighbor as ourselves. In the ancient Jewish teaching, it was stressed that the neighbor was not only the one you knew, but the stranger. Jesus took it a step further, calling his fellow Jews to expand not only the category of neighbor, but to expand the category of stranger, to include those you don't like. So, from all of that, I believe is where our identity as a parish came to be recognized and claimed as historically Black, radically inclusive, walking with Jesus. I'm not completely sure when it got phrased that way. I remember when I was here between 2000 and 2008, we had developed lots of different statements that all had something to do with welcoming all people to Christ's table, no matter who they were or whatever. And I think it was sometimes after I left, but I don't know whether it was in those 2 years from 2008 to 2010 that you guys operated so well on your own. And or whether it was after that as you began to kind of get back into the parish, but at some point in that, this came about. Does anybody remember when? Nancy?
It was when Father Anderson was here.
Okay.
And he helped us formulate that, and we adopted it. But that was kind of his sense of who we are.
Who we were, right. Excellent, excellent. And the nice thing about it is it captures in such great terms and images our identity. How we go about loving God and loving our neighbor as a parish. We do it with an identity that is historically black, and we claim that. We do it with an identity that is historically radically inclusive, and we claim that. And we do it with an identity that seeks always to walk with Jesus, even when we don't walk as well as we used to walk. And we claim that. Each of these pictures, banners, they represent one of those aspects. They usually hang in different places. This first picture, Father Jones, usually hangs in the narthex, where there's some other displays today that I encourage you to look at. The middle one, that banner usually hangs over here. It stands for radically inclusive, historically Black, radically inclusive. And then the last one, which is what used to be on the poster at the beginning of the war, I reframed it like this, and we will hang it again over that old altar of St. Luke's after today. But I'm suggesting that for the 3 Sundays, we might want to leave things like this as we celebrate and focus on who we are as St. Luke's. So I want to take each one of these things. I'm going to make a couple of comments about them. And then I'm going to throw it open for some discussion with some leading questions from me. Because a picture is worth 1,000 words. And we have these pictures, we have other pictures, some group photos from every 5 years since 2005 to 2017, so 3 group photos out there. We have some pictures of St. Luke's today and people that are in leadership positions. We have some pictures from 2003 and 2004 and the Bible schools that we used to do for the whole neighborhood during 2003 and 2004, which we did in the evenings. And one was under the Boab tree. That was the first one we did. The other was the Jerusalem Marketplace. So I encourage you to take a look at those. Those are other pictures that tell the story of who we are. And I also encourage you for the second Sunday of this event, if you have pictures at home, either from way back in the past or from just the past or the more recent past or the present, maybe you have one from the future, I don't know if that's possible. But I would invite you to bring those next week, just in whatever condition you have them, so that you can, during fellowship time, we can share them with each other. You don't have to make a display of them. If you've got them in an album, bring the album. I have a wonderful album that you made me when I left in 2008. And you conveniently left room for me to add some pictures to that, and I have over the years found more pictures, so I'm gonna add those pictures. I'm gonna bring that album. If you have an album, if you have a shoebox, if you have an envelope, just bring it with you. If you have a phone, share it with you. But the idea is that during fellowship, we might just share those things, not in a formal way, but just letting other people look at what we've got or see what we've got. And then if stories come up through that, tell that story. So the story today, though, is about what it means to us to be historically Black, radically inclusive, walking with Jesus. And what do we think are our challenges for the future in building on that identity right now? So those are the kinds of questions I'll ask. Starting with the first one. To be historically Black for us, has a couple of different things. I mean, it goes back to 1936, and in the time when segregation so affected the churches that a small group of Episcopalians were having to go to North Carolina to find a church that would let them go to church because none of the white churches wanted them here. Well, the solution wasn't to invite them here, but into their churches, because obviously that would have been a little outside of what was happening. But they did, through the first African American bishop in the Episcopal Church, Denby, D-E-M-B-Y, we have a picture of him. I think it's John Denby was his first name. And the work of others, St. Luke's was established in 1936 as a Black church, a Black Episcopal church. But our real identity, I think, begins with Father Matthew Jones. Because still, obviously, when he came in 1953. In 1951, St. Luke's moved to this building. They built this brick building for the church and added on the parish hall, which was an old house. That was in 51. In 53, they called Matthew Jones, and he stayed 18 years. 18 years. And I believe that was the formation of the identity. And what people remember of Matthew Jones isn't a staged portrait, but him walking to protest integration. St. Luke's being a place where those who were going to do sit-ins or march or just walk, I mean, he's just out there walking, or in any kind of organized way. It was a place where many of them came together to move. So I want to know, and I want to throw out to you, that is part of what it means for us to be historically Black, is to stand up for racial justice. So when you think about that, from your standpoint in being here, what is important to you about being part of an historically Black congregation? What is important to you first, is the first question. And anybody can start. Tim's going to get up and we'll get it better on the microphone if he points the camera at you, so don't get freaked out by that. If you can stand up to do this, please do, so people can hear you better. Who would be willing to give a, well, I'll take about 2 or 3 things, then we'll move on to the next thing. But who would say something about what it means to them, why they're here, what being historically black has to do with why you're here. Jim.
I think for me it embodies what I've believed for a long time, that a God who created all things has to have a way to communicate with all of creation. And that means being a part of a church that stands for that, for equality of racial justice, but honoring the differences we have while still seeking to be who we are.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody else, let's get two more things on this and then we'll move to radically inclusive. So we're still focused on being historically black. What is important about being historically black? You know what? I would love to hear from somebody who is black on about what is important to you about being in a church that may now look more white than black, but is historically black and claimed it. Why are you here?
Come on, Ms. Williams.
Come on, somebody. I know you always have something to say.
Come on.
I think being involved in, the first time I heard Episcopal, most people think of it as rich and white. And so having a historical black church here in the Knoxville area is so wonderful because there's so many communities that do not. I'm from Bristol. I think I know an Episcopal church there, Emmanuel Episcopal. They're very welcoming, very warming, but that is not their motto, historically black. So I think I like to hear when a church has its ministry is historically black, because it means that I am included in I believe when God created us, He created a rainbow that invited everybody, race, creed, sex, etc. And I feel like this church amplifies that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy, and then we're going to move on to the rainbow, okay? Nancy, what are you to say?
I was wearing the shirt that Barbara has on. If Barbara could stand up and turn around. I was wearing that at Walmart one day, and a man came up behind me. He was white. I did not know him. He said, I was trying to catch up with where your shirt is. He said, that is so wonderful. And so one of the things I'm hoping we can do is get some more of those shirts.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's move to the rainbow thing. James kind of got us pointed in that direction. I'm not exactly sure when that banner was made. It was either right towards the end of when I was here the first time, or probably within the 2 years right after I left, would be my guess. It was somewhere in there that I started seeing it appear in pictures.
Was it Paige? I think it was made when...
No, it was way before Paige. I think Dawn made it. Dawn Adkins.
No,
we had
the first time Paige was here in the 90s.
Right, but see, I wasn't here till the 2000s.
Right.
Till 2008, and we had a different banner when I first came, because I remember that. So I know that this one was either towards the end of when I was here. And when I look back at pictures, it starts appearing around 2009 in pictures that are dated. And before then, the older banner that was here when I came was the one that appeared. That we left it somewhere. And I think that was what was the impetus eventually to do another one. But Candace, tell me about radically inclusive.
Oh, no, well, wait a minute,
Okay.
I just want every Sunday I get this beautiful view of this stained glass panel. I don't know the history of that, but it's interesting now that we're talking about the rainbow tribe, that's right there in the stained glass, and it's echoed from, it's an echo from the
Excellent.
banner.
I think it is. Who knows anything about the stained glass?
Right? Yeah.
When it appears.
The stained glass.
Not about what is up there now, but before that was up there, in those large paintings, we had some beautiful paintings, you know, one had a cross on it. They'd been provided by the Mott family in memory of Father Mott. And I remember when those were taken down, not all of us, you know, agreed with it, but,
Oh, yeah, that was, that,
you know, we were just,
yeah, that's another story.
So back to this idea of radically inclusive. Why is it important to you to be in a church that is radically inclusive? And what does it even mean to you to be radically inclusive? Is it just about rainbows, or what does it mean to be radically inclusive? Somebody that hasn't spoken yet. Catherine, back on the back row.
So, when I think of inclusive, I'm remembering, so I grew up in St. Peter's in New York, which was established in 1760 something, and it was used as a hospital during the Revolutionary War, and then was continuing to be you know, inclusive from there. And so inclusivity to me was just being shaped into what your community needs at the moment. Like, we had food pantries the whole time I was growing up, and before it was a hospital. In the Revolutionary War, it was voting registration booths in the 1960s and 1970s. And so when I moved here, I wanted to find a community that had that same energy of, it's not just about if you're gay or if you're part of a minority group or what it is. I mean, like, don't get me wrong, that's a huge part of your identity, but that builds such a foundation for how your church welcomes people. And so that's why I found myself at St. Luke's.
Thank you, thank you. Another person who hasn't had a chance to speak yet on why it's important to you for St. Luke's to be radically inclusive. Annabelle.
I'm going to talk for both of us because we've been together a long time. Pam and I come from a very evangelical background, where we were taught that gay folks were coming for our children. You know, that we needed to be very afraid. And that was, you know, when you get things poured into you, it makes a mark. But as we drew closer to Jesus, I was in Memphis, she was here, God just started working on our hearts. And a few years ago, maybe, I remember we were walking on the boulevard in Allen Home, and we both said, we have to find a church that's fully inclusive. And Pam was thinking about going one way, and I ended up here, and finally she said, I think I need to come there too. But yeah, it was a journey, and that's why I don't lose it with people who aren't as far on the journey as I am, because I trust that if they're truly seeking God's truth, they'll get there. Even though that's very hurtful for a lot of friends who are gay, who are transgender, it's very hurtful for them to not be there yet. So it's easier for me as a white cis woman to say that, but I do still have hope for
Yes,
others.
but it's still, and that is as much a part of being radically inclusive as anything else, is not to have to be where those people are, and to continue to stand for where we need to go, and yet to realize that they're on a journey too, and they just aren't there yet.
May I add one last thing?
Okay, you can have one last thing, then unless somebody else wants to add something, we're gonna move to the next one. Go ahead.
There is one thing, when I was looking for churches in Tennessee, it is one thing to go, oh, I'm inclusive. Like, we're an inclusive church, and then have you be the only queer person.
Yeah.
It is another thing entirely to walk into this congregation and be met by people who are also in the community, to be preached to by people who are also in the community, to have music, to have celebration, to have, it is something so different to say you're inclusive than it is to be inclusive and to be in a community.
Oh, excellent point, yes. Yes. Okay, Nancy, you get the last word before we start walking.
I want to point out something. That is not a typical rainbow.
Right.
There is lavender in there.
Yes.
There's pink in there.
Yes.
There's hot pink.
Yes.
And that, it means that it points us to the flag that is used by transgender, by non-binary, and it means that those folks, if they come, or maybe we should go out and get them, that they are welcome too.
Yes.
Maybe they're
Yes,
here.
yes. And possibly ways of being different that we haven't even thought of yet. You know, whether it's in terms of gender orientation or in terms of neurodivergence or handicaps, or, you know, I mean, there are lots of ways that it can be a challenge to be, not just to say you are, but to be inclusive. I mean, I remember I think in some of the pictures that I hope we'll be seeing next week, we'll see that we used to have a row of people in wheelchairs that were in an assisted living center that Rose Spears' daughter, Robin, worked in, and they brought a van each week, and those people lined that back on both sides. There were 3 or 4 over here, 3 or 4 over there. And for years they were a part of this church. There still can be seen in 2010 in the picture out there in 2010. So, but
one of the in wheelchair was confirmed.
and one of them in the wheelchair was confirmed. That's correct. Yeah, yeah. All right.
And most weeks we have Larry here with his oxygen concentrator.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, there's lots of stories. I'm going to encourage you to keep those going with each other during the meal. Let's move, though, for this time now to the last one, Walking with Jesus. A little history about that series of pictures. It was from the Martin Luther King Day Parade, which was sponsored at that time by the Martin Luther King Commission and took place in January.
Yes.
And that's why we all can barely be seen, because we've got so many coats and hats on. This particular King Parade happened in January of 2003. The Iraq War was brewing to go into Iraq. We went into Iraq, we went into Baghdad. The siege of Baghdad happened in April of 2003, so that was January. That's why you see us holding signs that we marched with and then had our picture taken with that say, no war in Iraq. We thought it was appropriate to do that because Martin Luther King was very, very strong in protesting violence too. In fact, he got in trouble sometimes with more of the racial justice advocates because they felt like it was diffusing the energy from the other, but he was equally strong in both. And so it was part of our being historically black. And we marched with those signs. We saw it as literally walking with Jesus because we felt like Jesus walked in the way of peace. Not that there couldn't, I mean, he turned over tables too, so not that there couldn't be times when things happened. But we thought he walked in the way of peace, and we saw that. You'll see other pictures of us walking in gay pride parades, of that being walking with Jesus. So in that picture where we're together, Bishop von Rosenberg is standing with us. I was the priest in charge at that time. I think I had just been made priest in charge as opposed to extended supply, but we had not grown to a parish where I was the rector yet. We did that in 2005. And then you'll see Doris Scott Crawford in the middle one, and then just a group in the parade carrying the banners for the parade. So it's a symbol, an icon, where we're literally walking with Jesus, but kind of an outward and visible sign of what it means inwardly and spiritually to be called to walk with Jesus. A lot of us don't physically walk well anymore, but we still walk with Jesus in terms of living with Jesus and acting with Jesus. And I think the walking is a symbol of an outward and visible sign and of inward and spiritual grace, a sacrament to live into the vision of God in a real way in this world. So, same question I asked on the others. What is important to you about being a place where we see our social justice, not just as individual rights, it is that, but also as a part of the vision of God for all creation? What does it mean to you to walk with Jesus?
If y'all aren't sick of my voice.
Say it a little bit
I
louder.
said if you guys aren't sick of my voice,
That's okay, go ahead.
I think that something that's been very important to me is that when I leave church, I know that I have the love and support of the parish, and I know that I have you guys with me. And so it might not be like the same idea as walking in Jesus' light or all of the more literal phrases, but to know, you know, especially with the job search and with all the ups and downs of life, I know that you guys are behind me, and I know that you guys are with me, and so then I'm walking with Jesus throughout the week.
Wow, well said. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think a walk with Jesus is sort of like the disciples. He got tax collectors, he had shepherds, he had different people around him, and so when I leave church, I feel like I'm walking with Jesus because I'm leaving from a congregation of different backgrounds. Each of y'all have different backgrounds, and so I think that's sort of it sort of gives me the sense that I'm walking with Jesus because I'm walking with people that's from different backgrounds, like the people he chose as disciples.
That you might not normally get to know.
There you go.
Right, okay. One more.
Well, I remember when I was director of nursing at a facility, and the administrator was just very, just closed-minded, and he and I had several little run-ins. And I remember using St. Luke's as an example in a memo to him, because at that time we had an Asian organist. We had Barbara's friend, I think he's Native American, who played the guitar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I said we had a Caucasian priest, and he couldn't see that I had a more open mind about inclusion and things like that. I remember him telling me I needed to get a new car because the director of nursing should not have a 2000-something car, you know. And, but I always, and I would say to my staff, you know, if I can help somebody, then my living is not in vain. And that was me. I mean, that's how I felt. And I think and you know, Jesus says, whatsoever you do to the least of these, you do unto me. So that's part of, and I don't have a perfect path to walk.
Which of us do.
Yeah, try to.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for sharing these stories. Here's what I invite you to do. As you move after the service in there, and we're having meals and conversation and everything, if it is a way for it to come up, be willing to talk with each other about what you think you see the challenges for St. Luke's now might be. The challenges, not the old stuff of, oh, are we going to be able to have enough money in the budget to do this and this? Not that. I'm talking about what are the challenges to us today to keep our identity as historically black, to feed that identity, nourish that identity. What are the challenges for us today to really be radically inclusive in the way Kat was talking about? What is the way to walk with Jesus, not just when we're in a parade? but when we're walking with people who walk with Jesus as we try to do every day. Those are life questions. They're spiritual questions. They're physical questions and they're mental questions. We are mental, physical, and spiritual beings. So talk with each other. You've heard some of the history of our past. You've heard some of what it means to the hearts of the people that are really kind of the faithful core that are here just about every Sunday that we see right now in the pews. Talk with each other about how does this story continue? How do we write the next chapter of our story as historically black, radically inclusive, walking with Jesus. Amen.
Amen.